Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Good night and good luck.
Hey, everybody. Chuck Wilson, your host, as always, here on The Elephant in the Room. The elephant in the room this week is distractions. There's a great article in Politico this week I recommend you go take a look at. It is called The 47 Things Donald Trump Would Rather Talk About Than Jeffrey Epstein. I don't care how many there are. You put 100, you put 1,000, you could put 1,000,000 on there. America has started to make up its mind about where Trump is on Jeffrey Epstein. You're going to see them throw out stuff every single day. The tariffs, the ballroom at the White House, all the garbage, all the swill, all the slop. They're going to toss out everything under the sun. You're going to keep up with this ridiculous Obama to Russia trope. It's not working. It's not working in part because of all of you. You decided as a country, Americans decided as a people, this story in which we find ourselves trapped with Donald Trump about his life, his role, his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and the concomitant scandal of them trying to cover up in the White House and the Justice Department. You decided it mattered. And as Americans, you haven't let it go. And you know, Trump has always had a superpower of distraction. He's always been able to change the subject. He's always been able to bullshit his way out of problems. He's always been able to trick people into believing that the last outrage should be forgotten so you can talk about the next outrage. It has been an extraordinarily effective strategy for him for an entire decade, but it is not working. The elephant in the room today is that tactic has started to fall apart. I have a suspicion, and I think this could be a good thing for the country. My suspicion is that while that strategy has fallen apart for his Epstein-related defense, I also think it's good for the country that we may be growing up a little bit. We may be understanding a little bit now that chasing the next dragon, chasing the next rabbit, is not always the strategy for a responsible citizenship. It's not always a strategy for a country that needs to preserve and protect itself. The ubiquity of Donald Trump's lies, every single minute of every single day for 10 years. I know the catalog at one point stood at 36,000. It must be significantly higher by now, right? Those lies were almost always one of two things: self-aggrandizement or distraction. Sometimes the Venn diagram overlaps a bit. But the elephant in the room is that the self-aggrandizement now rings completely hollow. He's had a nickname attached to him. He will never escape the taco nickname, and he still keeps doing it. People know their foreign countries aren't paying the tariffs. Wall Street and Main Street are disconnected now economically in a fundamental way. And they on Main Street know that their gas isn't cheaper, their groceries aren't cheaper, their rent isn't cheaper, their healthcare isn't any cheaper. There is no bullshit golden age except in Donald Trump's fevered brain. And the distance between Trump and the rest of America, including 30% of people who say they voted for Donald Trump in the year 2024, who believe he's covering up pedophilia with Jeffrey Epstein, 30% of Republicans, MAGA voters, who voted for him in 2024 think he's covering it up. They forgave so much for so long. And Tom Nichols the other day had an example. He described the MAGA loyalty to Trump as a Jenga tower. You could pull one little piece out here and one little piece out there and one little piece out there. But their greatest fear now is that they've pulled out a piece and maybe there's one piece left holding the tower together. And in a large measure, America continuing to pay attention to this story, continuing to focus on this story, continuing to ride this story is because the Jenga tower, while it was so imposing for so long, while it looked so impervious to logic and reason and fact and truth for so long, the reason it's changing now is all about Epstein. He is not the same man he was in 2024. He's not the same man he was in 20. He sure as shit isn't the same guy he was in 2016. This is the first time Donald Trump is hunted, where he's looking over his shoulder, not the victims of various Trump scams, schemes, assaults, horrors. Trump's looking over his shoulder now. Trump's looking over his shoulder worried that there is something in this material, something in these thousands of pages of documents, something in the 4,700 Epstein wire transfers, something somewhere. And maybe it's something he's forgotten because he's not the same guy. This week, he comes out and says Epstein stole Virginia Duprey from him.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, does that include Virginia Duprey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her.
Donald Trump is not notoriously a man. Hello, dog. Donald Trump is not notoriously a man who is a good personnel manager. He knows the 4 or 5 people around him immediately day to day. In the end of July in the year 2025, Donald Trump suddenly knows who Virginia Giuffre is and remembers the exact details. She was an assistant towel girl in the women's spa at Mar-a-Lago, and Jeffrey Epstein stole her from him. The distractions aren't working because the facts are louder than the lies. The distractions aren't working because the guilt of Epstein and Maxwell is so enormous. The crimes they committed against these young girls and young women, the rapes of these young girls and young women. Why would Donald Trump have been upset if Jeffrey Epstein stole a towel girl from his hotel? Why? Why would he be upset? That's a dime a dozen. She's a West of 95 girl in Palm Beach. If you're not from Palm Beach, you won't know what that means. But she's a townie. A million girls like that easily could have replaced her. He would never have known her name, by the way, when she was on staff. Never. He would never have known her name. Why does he know now? Why does he know now? He would love to move on. He would love it. He went to Scotland last week hoping to move on. It didn't happen. They've thrown out trade deal bullshit all week. All of it's just bullshit. All of it's just a fabrication. None of these deals are deals. They're just concepts of deals. You know that. You guys all get that. The distractions aren't working because, again, you see him flailing. You see him breaking character. You see him losing his shit online and off. You see him snapping at reporters. You see him increasingly not able to contain his own fear and anxiety and hatred for this. People who do evil, reprehensible, awful shit, and they're sociopaths like Trump, they don't really feel guilt. He does not care what happened to Virginia Giuffre because of Epstein. He cares about whether he gets exposed. And it's broken the spell. It has changed how people look at this guy. He can't change the subject. He can't get his brain off of it. It's chewing on him every day. It's consuming him. It's in his brain like RFK's brain worm. And every day he wakes up and goes, what do I say now? What do I do now? How do I change the subject now? Again, that Politico article is magnificent. It's one of those little weird infographics. As you scroll down the screen, the different things pop up. It's cute. Well done. Read it. It's a free article. Because you will see, when you read all the things that they tried, you read all the bullshit they've tried to pull, all the things they've tried to scam people on, none of it works. It hasn't changed anything. Now, look, if you took all the things that they're saying they've done assertively in a vacuum, if the Epstein story didn't exist at all, let's do a sort of Gondonkin experiment, a counterfactual here for a second, and he was bullshitting about all these great trade deals and saying, oh, the stock market's doing X and Y, what would happen to his approval numbers? They would move up. What has happened to his approval numbers in the last month? This is another big reason why the distractions aren't working. Donald Trump's approval numbers are now in the high to mid 30s. With some demographics, like young voters, they're down to about 28%. The distractions were working when Trump had a pad in the polling, a buffer in the polling. When we had big demographic groups that were going to stick with him no matter what, or we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. That day is passing. That day is in the rearview mirror now. When he had the ability to distract at scale, when he had the ability to bullshit people at scale, it relied on the fact that his approval ratings were in the low 50s or high 40s. When your approval ratings reach historic lows, and they are historic, in this day and age, it's different than it was in the old days. By the old days, I mean pre-2016. There used to be a big mushy middle in this country where presidents would fight. They would hold their base, and they'd fight for that 15 to 20% in the center. Over time, the siloing of social media, the siloing of news media, the filtering of Americans into rival tribes and warring factions has meant that center has gotten smaller. In a back of the envelope kind of way, about 40% of Americans are activist Republican, and that ranges from MAGA to Mitt Romney. And about 40% of Democrats are activist Democrats, and that ranges from AOC to, I don't know, Doug Jones. All of these ideas that Trump is throwing out there, when he had nearly 50% of the vote, it showed you that the party was unified behind him. Now that he is down in the mid to high 30s, it is showing you that he is down to the nut. He's down to the monster truck guys. He's down to the MMA freaks. He's down to the Patriot Front dipshits. And he's down to old MAGAs, because old MAGAs are still loving on Donald Trump. It's a longer story. But with that number down where it is now, the distractions don't work. He's lost 10 to 15% of those people now, folks. That's a bloodbath in modern politics. His own base is now convinced that he was A third of his own base who voted for him in 2024 are convinced that he was involved with Jeffrey Epstein and pedophilia, and he's covering it up. And he's caught in a really shitty trap right now. He has hoped he could distract you away from all this stuff while promising Ghislaine Maxwell a pardon or a commutation. If he pardons her, if he commutes her sentence, if he nods and winks at her and sends Todd Blanche down to Tallahassee to go, all right, keep your mouth shut, or say the following, and you'll get a pardon at the end of the administration. First off, I don't think she believes that. And she should not, by the way. She should absolutely not believe that. If he doesn't, the story never stops. If he does, the story gets worse. He's in a terrible position. This is the worst political standing Donald Trump has ever had. His coalition is still obedient in the Senate and the House. They are waking up every day saying, God, I hope one of these distractions works. They're desperate for it, guys. They are desperate for a distraction. They are begging God for a calamity. They want an asteroid to strike Nebraska, or a giant shark to eat 100 tourists in Florida, or some other distraction where he can come in and reset the media narrative. But that is not working. Guys, the reason it's not working, again, I want to go back to this because it's important, is you. Americans decided they want the truth about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and Donald Trump. They want the truth, not only because of prurient curiosity. There is some of that. Not only because of political animus towards Trump. There is some of that. They want the truth because they're realizing that there were not one or two victims of Jeffrey Epstein, not a dozen or 2 dozen, but there were hundreds of young women and young girls who were recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, who were abused by powerful, wealthy men. And they've realized that Donald Trump, if he's not one of those powerful and wealthy men, then he's protecting the other ones, that he's using the power of the presidency to protect rapists and pedophiles. It's sick. It's wrong. The distraction is not working. It will not work. And that, my friends, is this week's elephant in the room. Hey, thanks everybody for listening. As always, I deeply appreciate your time and attention. We love making these podcasts for you. And we would like to just ask you for one small favor in this regard. Go on your podcast apps, like and rate this podcast 5 stars. It really helps with the metrics and the algorithm. And if you could do the same thing on YouTube, we would sure appreciate it because, again, we are all slaves to the algorithmic gods. All right, folks, I'll see you again next week. And this has been The Elephant in the Room. I'm your host, as always, Rick Wilson. Thanks, everybody.
Good night and good luck.